Hi, welcome to today's CG Talk with the wonderful Vidya Dinamani, a longtime member of the Council's community and moderator, and her co-author, Heather Samarin. They're going to talk about their new work, Groundwork, their new book, Groundwork, getting better at making better products. Very excited. I'm really, I'm thrilled to be here today. These are some of my favorite people. Here's how it's going to work. I'm going to introduce the wonderful Hope Gurian. And then Hope is going to moderate the conversation with Vidya and Heather. Use your chat, the chat button to put up any questions. Oh, look at the yay Hope from Troy Anderson. Very nice. And, we Hope will use her judgment. She may, bring up a few questions as Heather and Vidya are talking, and then of course we'll have a Q&A at the end. All right, so let me just do a quick brief introduction of Hope. Hope Gurian, first of all, she's also a good friend, as is Vidya and Heather. Hope first joined the council back in 2012. So it's been a nice 8-year run at least, Hope. I feel like we've known each other even longer, but that's it's been great. You've been such an important part of this community. You've got more than 20 years. She has more than 20 years of product management and leadership experience, leading product design and analytics teams. She founded, and I love the name of your company, by the way. She founded Fearless Product LLC to serve companies seeking growth through product innovation. And she specializes in coaching new product leaders. We talked a lot about coaching in the call we had a few weeks ago with Marty Kagan. And often from non-product disciplines to help accelerate confidence and competence. She also has a terrific podcast. Sign up for it now if you're not already, called, guess what? Fearless Product Leadership. And it's a great podcast. A lot of members listen to it, and I recommend it. The series helps new product leaders learn from experienced peers. And she's led and coached more than 50 B2B and B2C product teams. And prior to Fearless Product, she was CPO at Career Builder and Chief Product Officer at Beachbody. And she is the moderator of Product Council 11, woo, here at CG. All right, so with that,
I see many people from 11 on the line.
Yeah, we do. Looks like it. The chats are coming in. All right, so I'm going to now go on, stop my video and turn this over to you, Hope. So thank you, Vidya and Heather, for coming, and Hope for hosting this. Very excited.
Yeah, now I'm thrilled to be able to host, and I'm really excited for all the great information that both Vidya and Heather are going to share today. They are co-founders of Product Rebels and co-authors of the newly released book, Groundwork, which you can see on this title slide. But I've got my copy, and there's a lot of great information here that I know is relevant to so many of the council members. So it's no surprise to me that there's so many of you joining today. So a little bit more about Vidya and Heather. Well, many of you probably already know and love Vidya from her work as a moderator of the Product Leader Council at Collaborative Gain, but she also has been coaching product teams and leaders, and of course has been in the trenches leading product and customer experience roles at companies like Intuit and Mitchell International. And she has partnered with Heather, who also has led product and marketing at a variety of B2B and B2C companies in a variety of industries, healthcare, gaming, financial services. Vidya and Heather work together at Intuit, and they have combined decades of experiences creating and evolving products that delight customers. So they've got a lot of valuable information that they're going to share with all of you today. And that's, of course, why we're gathered here, to learn from their hard-won wisdom and understand the techniques that will make it easier for you and your teams to lay the groundwork for good product decisions. For today's talk, as Phil mentioned, we are going to get questions from you. So please do share them in the chat. Between Phil and Brittany and I, we're going to be looking at your questions and bringing them up for Vidya and Heather to answer throughout the talk today. And we will reserve 15 minutes at the end of our time together to make sure we get all of your questions answered. So I'm really excited to dive in. Again, thank you so much to Vidya, Heather, and of course, Phil and Brittany for getting us together here today. And so Vidya and Heather, will you please help us get better at making better products?
Thank you,
Thanks,
Hope.
Hope.
That was such a lovely introduction. And I'm so glad to be here. It's a really special group for me to talk to. And I know I've talked about Heather about CG for such a long time. What you see in front of you is a little Slido. We like a little bit of interaction. I know it's all virtual, but if you can just hold up your camera up to the little QR code, your phone, open the camera, scan it. And we just wanted to see, this is just interesting. It's fun. We'll share the data. And so I'm just going to give it a second while you start pulling up your cameras and populating. Please play. It's so much more fun. And just going back to the kind introduction by Hope, she's an awesome product leader. This is such an amazing community. We're really excited to be here talking to our peers. Over the last 4 years, Heather and I have coached over 100 companies from small all the way up to Fortune 50. And we found these patterns coming up over and over again in the way that we thought about product and what we diagnosed and what we saw in companies. And we really honed it in to these core pillars that we're going to talk to you about today. And these pillars form the bases of what we think is so critical for every product team to get better at making better products. Now, a lot of us as product leaders, especially in CG, who love products and customer experience so much, it's what holds us together. There's a lot that's going to be familiar. What I want you to think about is the way that we framed it, the way that we put this information together, and we're really looking forward to your questions and pushing us on this. Again, this is cool. We have
UX, big group of folks have UX.
Yeah.
Sales and analytics. Sales, that's a tough combination of product management and sales.
It is.
Analytics.
Yeah, training and adoption. Yeah.
Yeah.
Phil. I wonder if that was Brittany. That's awesome. Thank you for doing that. There's going to be a few more of these Slidos, so keep your camera ready. So as we start, this again is just based on hundreds of clients, and this groundwork is consistently what we see is missing. So the way that we want to start our talk is a couple of customer testimonials. It wouldn't be CG if we didn't start with customer. And so a couple of quotes from products. It's the best company I've ever seen. We'll never have a home without one. It's been a lifesaver. Like, these are quotes. These are customer testimonials we would all love to have, right? So let's take a look at the products behind them. The first is Wise. Tell us about this, Heather.
Yeah, so Wise, taking the security camera and sort of home, smart home devices by storm in the US, right? Just got a Series A funding, I think at 20 million over the last year, and are doing phenomenal. And this little camera here is $20. And if for any of you like myself, I started the Ring system at my house. And I'm a little bummed. I'm kicking myself right now, given some of the challenges in the experience that I've had and just the cost overall. So I think Wise has a long runway here.
The next one, the one that I'll never have a home, is Ecovee. And if you haven't heard of this, look it up. They got about a $35 million injection by Amazon a few years ago. Last year it became the brand of the year in Canada. And this year it's going to top $1 billion in sales. It's growing like crazy. And there's that word, love, right? It's what we want from every product that we work on.
Yeah, and we get a lot of questions when we do our talks about, well, yeah, this is really easy for B2C, right? That's a norm. But what about B2B? How do you achieve this? And do many people actually achieve really great customer experience and good feedback? And this is a really great example. I feel a little bit blasphemous because, we were at Intuit for 13 years, leading different products. I led QuickBooks for a while. But this is a rival right now in payroll. They're a small business payroll service that you can just see. They've got huge followers now. I think they received a Series D financing last year of 200 million. They're taking, again, the small business world by storm here. But you see the words lifesaver, love the ease of use. best payroll provider out there, and QuickBooks has one. And so this is a really great example of a B2B company achieving big things with great customer experience.
So for all of these, I'm going to pull up the metric that we all love to talk about. I know it's controversial, but we know that NPS of 60 is world-class, right? A Net Promoter Score. And all of these have incredible Net Promoter Scores. So what we want to see is, well, why? So when you take a look, and we dug deeper into these companies, and including all the companies that we've coached and worked on, we found there were 3 things that these companies had in common. And before I go there, these companies do make it look easy. We all know, right, as product leaders, it really isn't. It's not that easy. And if you don't believe me, then we're going to pick on some of our favorites. The first is Google Glass, right? I bought one of these for my team 5 years ago. We bought Google's advertising, all the features that they promised it would have. I was working for an insurance software company at the time, and we believed that we could integrate this and create a much better customer experience. None of it worked, right? Epic failure.
Oh, new Coke, enough said.
She's not going to talk about that. Oh, I still have PTSD from Windows Vista. I mean, I couldn't get rid of that thing fast enough.
This was a funny one. I finally found a video of the early commercial, but imagine you think of the stereotypical Harley Davidson rider, so the rough and ready guy with leathers and the like, maybe even a beard, but there's some stereotyping going on here on that Harley Davidson rider. And then imagine this commercial, which is so funny. You have this handsome model with no shirt on and long flowing locks riding a Harley Davidson, and a narrator, a very harsh or strong French accent that's saying "legendary" by Harley Davidson, and you just got to laugh. And needless to say, they did not understand their market well enough, and it was another epic failure in just thoroughly understanding what resonated with their customer base. The last one here is, I don't know how many of the folks in this audience are in healthcare. So EHRs or EMRs, as they're often referred to, they're built out of the regulatory sort of requirements, right? And I've worked with many. They struggle a ton in evolving the experience to serve their providers that then serve patients. And I would say that most of them struggle really hard and are not on a great trajectory. And that's what's creating sort of this disruption in the market with these new EHRs from some startups that are getting tough traction only because it's so hard to change your EHR once it's embedded into your healthcare system. But I think this is a really good example of they just have not spent enough time in understanding how to serve their customers well.
Okay, so we've teased you enough with bad products, and we told you we would tell you what it takes to build products. What I just want to give you is a quick background. Hope did such a nice job. Groundwork really came out of all the experience that she already said. I'm not going to go over this again. So today we want to tell you how to lay the groundwork. We want to share with you what we found, introduce the 3 pillars of groundwork, and then just briefly touch on how to practice it. So remember the products that we brought up, the things that they had in common, and the things that companies that do this really well have in common with 3 things. The first is they got super clear on the problem to solve. And I want to bring back Gusto that Heather introduced. As a small business, and again, in terms of looking at payroll and HR, so much of what they were serving for small business is getting rid of the complexity. They didn't need, they were being overserved by all the places like Intuit, unfortunately, like ADP, all the other providers. And they narrowed down and just removed most of the complexity and the features and the functionality that small business simply didn't need. They got super laser clear on the problem. They also knew their customers inside out. And here's an example, again, back from Gusto. They have a feature in their product that allows you as the business owner to write a personal note to each employee. Now that's kind of insane for any company of any size. Imagine getting a personal note from your boss. But for small companies, thinking about loyalty, thinking about retention of their employees, they really cared. They cared about this so much. They knew their customer, that this one feature has been an incredible delighter for them. And then the third, and this is nuanced, and we're going to go into this much more with the pillar, is they clearly connected. You saw a line of sight between the problem, the persona, and the need. And this is where so many companies drop the ball. And I can't wait to share you how we think about this. I also want to tell you, like Heather's going to talk about what we see and hear in a lot of instances when it's not working with these three pillars in place.
Yeah, I think we've all experienced this, right, in our careers in product leadership. When we haven't clearly articulated what problem we're solving, or there's multiple definitions of the problem or multiple definitions of the persona, it's hard to say no to anything. So when you've got, highly creative CEO or highly creative sales team that's coming to you with great ideas, it's really hard to say no. And when you can't say no, you end up with a priority list that's a mile long, right? You have a huge number of priorities. You have a huge backlog. You have a roadmap that's sort of meandering and tough to justify because you're trying to throw everything in there because it's not clear who we're solving for or what we're solving for. And when we do that, when we don't have sort of the established groundwork, a lot of decisions become opinion-based. And so the next big opinion to the room could upheave the decision you've already made, right? So you get a lot of overturned decisions, or just decisions that are delayed because more and more opinions come into the room. We've all been there, right? All of our product managers have been there. We've seen this over and over again. And so when you are overturning decisions or delaying decisions, you end up with a couple things, right? You end up with a confusing product, overly complex, or just not a really cohesive value proposition. You end up solving for just way too many features and functionality, which creates complexity for users, and you end up with a bunch of unhappy customers, right? And so it all stems from this groundwork that I think we've all sort of pinpointed at one time or another in our careers, but we continually see that it's challenging to establish this groundwork, especially when you're walking into an already established business or product line. How do we get better at that, right? And that's what Vidya and I really sort of focused on in this book. So, who has experienced these issues or has seen this in your product teams? Just chat or in the Slido, we'd love to hear from you guys on what have you experienced in just the last 30 days. And you can choose as many as you like here.
And just a friendly reminder, if you've got questions, to please put them in the chat. But I think, what you highlight is this tension between people who don't want to miss an opportunity.
That's right.
And therefore makes it the unintended consequences is the inability to focus and make hard choices. So
that's right.
Yeah. So great call out there.
Yeah, debates full of opinions and facts. Oh my God, versus facts, huge. I mean, we see that all the time, and we still fall back into that, right? When we don't always have the data, and so a lot of times we'll fall back into opinion. And so that's, we'll talk a little bit about how helpful having a clear problem and a clear persona or set of personas enables you to sort of steer clear of solely opinion-based decision making. Yeah, finding it hard to prioritize.
Yeah, we often see those go together as well, the prioritization and debates. I mean, those tend to go hand in hand. So thank you for playing. This is really useful. And it's kind of also a lot of CG, so much as like not being alone in this. So I hope this feels like this is issues that we all see. Okay, so we've gone through the background about why. So let's talk about what the three ground pillars are. It's convergent problem statement, actionable persona, and individualized needs. Now, we purposefully chose these terms The last thing I think our industry wants is yet another term that we've got to figure out what it means and connect it. So the clarity of like the problem statement, if we're going to talk about how it converges, we're going to talk about how to actually make a persona usable again and not a dirty word. And then individualized needs, I think, is the one concept that is really changes the way that teams that we've worked with think about how to make decisions. So let's talk about the problem statement first. I'm going to go through the section, then Heather's going to take over persona, and then we're going to tag teams. You're going to hear from me for a few more minutes. We're problem-solving creatures, right? We know this. Our teams, we even love to figure out what the solution is going to be. You know, our teams want to build features. That's natural. And so everything that we try as product leaders to do is pull people back to the challenge. What is the customer problem that we're dealing with? At Intuit, and I know there's some Intuit folks out there, there's some alumni out there, we used to call this grow broad to go narrow, really explore the problem space that you're in before you choose. In design thinking, we talk about convergent and divergent thinking. And then I know there's product peers of ours that refer to this as a problem space and a solution space. But no matter what you call it, it kind of doesn't matter. The idea is to really explore and get your teams and for them to come to you with a number of different problems that they've explored, they've talked to customers before they tell you how they've converged to a single problem. And our definition of this is that a convergent problem statement expresses the difficulty your customer's dealing with no attempt to address possible solutions. Almost every problem statement we see from teams coming to us when we coach them has the solution or a feature built in. And most of our work is pulling that out and getting to that core need. So we want to just do this as via an example. So let's go back to home thermostats. And this one looks very much like the one I have at home. It has a bunch of dials on it. I have no idea what the 3 buttons at the bottom do. I've never used them. I simply go up and down, and half the stuff is completely impossible to understand. So imagine we're a company and we've looked at this as antiquated. They're set in the 80s and 90s, and we're tasked to go ahead and change the home thermostat. It could be natural, and this is very similar to how teams work when we first meet them, is to put in a bunch of features. There are currently no home temperature systems that are easy to use. Ease of use being one of the first things that every team tells us. Maybe it's because of our Intuit days. They have simple, bold numbers. So let's make it easy to read. And they allow, because we want to be sexy, we want to get IoT in there, control temperature and humidity via their smartphone. Okay, so we've got a bunch of features. And a company out there did exactly this. They went ahead and they built a home thermostat, which looks pretty. It looks very elegant. It's got a couple of bold numbers. And yes, it connects to your smartphone. They launched it into the public, and this is kind of what the results they got. These are real testimonials. I love the idea, but it resets itself and changes the temperature setting all day long. This thing ended up costing me money. Nothing worse than waking up in the middle of the night in a sweat because it's 87 degrees. Needless to say, this product did not do well. So I want us to go back into the idea that we're going to build this thermostat and we're going to talk to customers, right? The thing that we love to do. And as we did that, we're exploring just the problems that they experience. First is, okay, so the display is confusing, unreadable. Then we hear things like different settings are needed for different days. I want to be able to monitor this remotely. And here comes some more interesting nuances. I'm spending too much on energy. I don't like the defaults. And I want you to take a leap of faith with me. And we started to hear a theme. And the theme that we started to hear was really around it not being the right temperature inside the home. And that we've decided that this seems to be the underlying problem that we really want to go after. And in doing so, we start to create a problem statement. And I want to read this to you. Homeowners have multiple cold and hot zones in the house. Maybe this is starting to resonate. They find it annoying and confusing figuring out how to set temperatures and zones automatically. So they just constantly change the thermostat manually. Now, this is a problem statement that has a clarity around what the customer is dealing with. There's an emotion behind it that we can actually empathize with. There's a root cause in terms of what are they doing as a result, and there's absolutely no solution. And you can imagine there's multiple ways that if we gave this to a team, that they could think about different ways to address the problem. So ecobee did just that. Looking at the problem, they not just put a thermostat on the wall, but they created these really cool mini devices. And what you do is you place them in different spots around your home. And when you do that, the temperature is read not by the thing on the wall, but by these little mini devices. And as a result, there are no longer any hotspots in the house. They solved the customer problem. And now you can see why they're growing so incredibly well. I think a lot of us know this quote and we love it. It's Theodore Levitt. He says, people don't want a 1/4-inch hole drill, they want a 1/4-inch hole. Well, it's 2020. And as product rebels, we want you to go a step further and we want to think about, well, what do you want to use the 1/4-inch hole to do? And as a shameless plug for the book, I can tell you that we actually take this example and we explore the idea of a problem statement around a 1/4-inch hole, and it's kind of fun. So I want you to go back to and think about, is your team, are they telling you problems? Are they coming to you with priorities and features and ideas? And again, I just want to throw it out there and ask you, like, think about what you've been given, the backlogs, the roadmaps that you have, and please share with us, like, how many of these are expressed as problem statements? And as we're doing this, like, Hope, what do you see when you go out and coach?
I was just going to say, I see that, like, so many teams, like they recognize that they want to be in the problem solving space, but that, like, the intentionality and the sort of criteria of what makes a good problem statement there's not enough rigor around that, because people are eager to jump to solutions. So I love that you have that criteria about how do you know when you've got a good problem statement.
Yeah, and what we often find too is people they're boiling the ocean with their problem statement, right? They keep it broad as opposed to making some sacrifices and saying we want to focus this here, and this is where we're getting that term convergent problem statement. And it's hard to articulate what the right problem is so that you're not cutting off your nose to spite your face, by no means, but also not trying to boil the ocean. That's the sort of sweet spot that we're looking at.
Cool. Let's keep moving.
All right. So we just talked about the problem statement and what we're going to solve. Now let's talk a little bit about the who we're going to solve. And before I move forward, I want to talk a little bit about how personas, most of the time when we talk about them, teams just roll their eyes at us. Personas have a really bad rap, unless you're in UX, which many that we saw earlier on, many of you have UX reporting to you. And so I would guess that you probably either use or have been recommended to use personas, but personas over time have gotten a really bad rap. And I want to talk about why. So let's start with this first example of an actual persona. Let's hear from Brent, CEO, been in the industry 33 years, age 54, 14 events attended, other association events attended, none. I focus on what will drive improvements and profits in my company. Okay, so what CEO shouldn't be focused on this, right? So pretty broad. I'd give this probably an F. Right. So let's try this next one. Helena, head of HR, married, 3 kids, has been at the company 10 years, skews female. That's interesting. Okay. Age 30 to 45, suburban. Okay. Well, that's getting a little bit, if you're thinking about some sort of civic duty related products, suburban might help in understanding her a little bit better. Calm demeanor. So does that tell me I need Zen colors in my UX? So, okay, telling me a little bit more about Helena, but I probably would give this a D in just general actionability. And what usually happens is when you have personas like these, they get shelved, right? Because they're not really actionable. So you're not pulling them out every chance you get when you're making a product decision. and they get shelved, they get a bad name, and most of the time you end up solving for everyone in the same way. You're not clearly articulating unique needs, unique attitudes related to particular segments of the market that you can actually delight. You do sort of broad swaths of needs and go broad. So you sort of boil the ocean from the full market, right? And that's obviously what we're trying to get away from. So we really want them actionable, and we're defining them very similar to people like oh my gosh, my mind's blanking, Cooper Design. He was sort of the grandfather of personas, right? And we're still defining them very similarly. A living archetype of your primary target customer, representing similar behaviors and characteristics among a group of individuals, but actively used in day-to-day product decisions. So how do we do this? Let's go back to Gusto for a moment and talk about potentially designing an onboarding experience for the payroll service, right? Let's say we start with what we have here, demographics, right? Female, 34 to 50, married, 2 kids. I'm starting to yawn, right? I'm starting to yawn when I see this, not sure how helpful that is if I'm designing an onboarding experience. We need more, right? We need to really understand beyond how old she is and what her income is, what she cares about, how she does her job, how she makes decisions, what keeps her up at night, what does she wish for, what motivates her. And there's something else that we need. And this is what we're calling character trait spectrums. This is a really fancy set of words for what I think everyone in this audience, including their teams, have actually thought about before. So an example of a character trait that we all use all the time is tech savviness, right? You're either tech savvy or tech phobic. And knowing one or the other, or where they sit in that spectrum, might help you think about how to design, in this case, a tech experience for them, right? And as we think about onboarding, we might think differently. If this payroll person at Gusto is more tech savvy, we may think differently about our onboarding experience than if they're really tech phobic. A couple other examples. This is specific to this product area, payroll tech product. She could be controlling, or is she more delegating, right? If I'm more of a delegator, I might do an online experience that says, invite my employees to set up their own profiles and I'll do the rest, right? As opposed to, if I'm more controlling, I might think differently about what to get her started with in her onboarding experience, right? So that's another kind of spectrum to think about for this particular persona. Another one might be how focused she is on accuracy versus being efficient in her job. At times, those can be at odds when you're designing an experience, right? If I want to, one of the big challenges we had in QuickBooks and even in TurboTax was opening up the black box, so to speak, so that people understood how things were calculated, and so that they felt confident in what was calculated and the accuracy of that, even if it meant taking a few more steps in the experience and a few more seconds in the experience to complete their task. We would make those trade-offs often, right? And this is another spectrum that we would want to know about this payroll manager at Gusto in order to better design an onboarding experience for her. So let's keep moving in this same vein, right? Let's talk about who this payroll processor is. She's more of a delegator. She's very tech savvy. She's also very focused on accuracy. If it's not accuracy, it doesn't go out and I check everyone's work. I know what I'm doing, just get me started. Just those few things alone is helping us get a vision for what we might do for Jennifer, right? For this onboarding experience for Jennifer. But there's a little bit more that we need to know, right? How does she interact with her boss? So her boss plays a role in how she does her job, right? And this is the buyer. So as I think about B2B personas, I'm always going to be thinking about, a user, there's probably, for larger SaaS companies, you probably got multiple roles, right? So multiple users, you have a buyer, and perhaps you have a decision maker, right? So there's always sort of that subset of personas you always want to define and understand the interaction between the buyer, the persona, and the user personas, right? In this case, I need to be up to date on the numbers. This is Carol, the owner of this small business. I need to be up to date on the numbers to know if we're going to meet our commitments every month. Okay, that might tell me a little bit about the onboarding experience that says, I might want to have Jennifer set up a quick snapshot for the owner that can be sent on a regular basis immediately, right? So again, we're trying, the goal here is really to focus more on who these people are, understanding the real person, right? Not just the demographics, right? So I'm getting to the real person. We're getting to the real attitudes. Vidya, if you can forward, yep. Real attitudes of that person and the real emotions of that person to help us make decisions quickly and with a lot more confidence. So we want these personas and how we define them to be actionable, not sitting on a shelf, not solving for too many people. And so what we do in Groundwork is help teams formulate actionable personas. And so I wanted to ask this question through Slido again. When was the last time your product team actively used a persona to make a decision, big or small, on the product?
And while people are answering that, a couple of questions came up that both relate to your problem statement and your personas. And that's like, this is not a product team sole decision. There has to be quite a bit of buy-in, alignment, participation with other customer-facing teams, sales, marketing, support. What has been your experience, recommendation about how and when to best involve them as you're creating these and making the hard choices about what attributes to include in them?
That's a great question. Vidya, do you want me to take it or you want to take it?
Yeah, talk about the practice.
Yeah, the book actually goes into a lot of detail. We spend a good portion of the book on what we call getting commitment. And that is a huge skill that product leaders, product managers have to perfect in order to get action and commitment by the whole organization. You know, the unique, this is preaching to the choir, a unique aspect of our jobs is that we have to get decisions and commitment from people that don't report to us ever, and have in some cases, competing objectives and goals. And if we can't master this skill, then we can't do our job. So we do spend an inordinate amount of time in how do we get commitment? And a lot of it is really getting away from opinion-based decisions, demonstrating the data through the words of the customer, through vision, images, videos, observational research, having additional functional partners actually present during research so they're hearing it from the voice of the customer, not through me. And so we go into a lot of tools and techniques in order to get there.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say before we move on, because I'm looking at the time, is being able to kind of come up with hypotheses before and showing some work and showing some research before getting to connect with other parts of the team. Because I think that what we want to do to stay away from opinion-based is to show customer research. So the 3 practices, which we'll go into briefly at the very end, which are hypothesis, scrappy research, and getting commitment, they blend in and connect with each of these pillars. So along the way, you are proving what you have in small amounts, you're doing it in the customer voice, and you're connecting with your peers. So absolutely, we recognize that. Thank you for sharing this. It's a little sad that you can't remember, but not a surprise.
Not a surprise.
We've been seeing this a lot.
Right.
Okay, the last one then is individualized needs. So let's go through this pillar. And what we find is, in an ideal world, right, we would have one problem, we'd have one persona, and then boy, the needs are pretty clear. That's not the real world. The real world is that we have multiple problems. We're trying to think about lots and lots of different things, and we're getting problems thrown at us all the time. There's multiple personas because there's so many different customer segments the company wants to grow, and that's constantly changing. And so what we find is this where things break down. We then start to try and build products that solve everything for everyone. So this particular last pillar is, how do you stop that madness and how do you make choices? How do you make product trade-offs? And so individualized needs for us is aspects of the problem that are tied to a particular persona that your solution must address. And they can be around anything: inefficiencies, it could be context that the persona is in, it could even be baseline expectations. But the clarity around setting needs per persona is what is important here. And we want to tell you how we do that. I'm going to use WISE as an example, a home security camera that Heather wants to replace all her rings with. And let's think about this. We all live in a home. Shouldn't we all have one? Heather?
Yeah, you'd think so, right? But as we think about some of these personas, we have three here. We've got Jane. She's a nurse, moved into a rental apartment, lives alone. We've got Peter. He's a suburbanite who owns his home, has a young family, travels a lot for business. And then we have Angie. She's a student, lives in a rented house with 3 roommates in a rundown part of the city. And so you step back and you say, can we develop one solution that delights all of these folks? And I would say you first have to learn, right? You first have to, do your homework. And the way that we do this is identifying their individualized needs and prioritizing each of those individualized needs. And the way that we do this is through observation. Observation is a huge part of our DNA. Vidya and I love to do observational research. We were lucky enough to have grown up in product management careers where we do the research, partnering with research, of course, but us being part of it and actually moderating a lot of it. And Intuit's a great example. We had the Follow Me Home program where we'd actually go on site to folks where they're filing their taxes, sit in their bedroom with them and watch them do their taxes, watch them find different documentation that the application or the tax form is asking for. And so this concept of observation allows us to sit in the shoes of our customers and our prospects in no other method actually allows for, right? Interviewing is really helpful, but observing is really the key in getting to understanding the needs and just sort of the environments these folks are in and how they're being challenged by the problem that you're solving, and what factors actually impact that. And once you're able to empathize and sit in their shoes, you can then step back and say, for each of these personas, I want to prioritize their needs in level of pain and level of frequency, and the pervasiveness within that particular segment. So you have a really clear understanding of each persona's individualized, I keep saying that word, set of needs that is prioritized. And that allows you to do a ton. And so let's talk a little bit about that. Let's go back to WISE and let's go through Jane, Peter, and Angie. So Jane, what we learned was she's always coming home late for work at night. She lives in the Pacific Northwest, lots of interesting weather. She's not handy, only buys things that work right out of the box, and she's on a budget. Whereas Peter, he travels a lot, always tries to stay connected everywhere he can to his family. He has multiple entry points at his home that need coverage, right? So it might be a little bit different than an apartment dweller like Jane. Kids leave the doors open, stresses him out. He can install and fix anything. Then there's Angie, pretty dicey after dark in her complex. Neighbor just got robbed. I want to check on my dog, see if he's tearing things up. Forgetful, sometimes leave the front door unlocked, right? I live in the Midwest, lots of crazy weather. So you can start to see what these environments and the needs of these individual personas are, which then when you're faced with some the features that you have at your fingertips to solve for any one of these folks, what do you do? I mean, there are so many different directions you would go down, and there's so many different ways that you would solve any one of these features. We're always blessed with the number of opportunities. The question is, how do you make good decisions quickly so that you can get moving, get learning? And how do you make them confidently so that you get commitment from the organization so that you can move forward? So what do you do, Vidya?
Yeah, and the thing you don't want to do, I can tell you, I'm bringing back my PTSD from Windows Vista, is you don't want to put all the features in. And just an aside, because I can't help myself, PC Magazine told you to turn off 12 features before you, as the minute you installed something. So let's not do that. Let's not build for everybody. So Heather took you through the different things that we observed. We went into their neighborhoods, we talked to Jane and Peter and Angie. And what I want you to do is to imagine that we've spent some time and we've created a set of needs around this. This translation from observation to need is so critical. And so we pulled out for Jane this idea about illuminating her entry, this need to work in nasty weather because she lives up in crazy Pacific Northwest. She can't do, that was a dig at Heather, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
I can't do, I can't do tough installations, and she needs a low price. This is someone on a budget. The needs for Peter, as we extrapolate them from observation again, is that this idea about needing to check when he's on the road, this is something that he really cares about. He also has multiple entrances, so need to cover multiple areas. It needs to lock up. Remember, his kids are leaving the doors open, and it needs to be able to install DIY. He's pretty handy. He can do this. The last one is extrapolating out of Angie. She wants to keep her entry well lit. She wants to see her dog, to lock up when she's not there, and to work again in nasty weather. Now, what we see a lot of the time is, I'm going to tell you a couple of things that we see in diagnosing teams. The first is this becomes a laundry list of needs. It turns straight into features and they start working through them. So let's not do that. I think that's sort of mistake number one. The second is that when we start looking at commonalities, so we see that Jane and Angie have a couple of things in common in terms of illumination. Then we see that Jane and Angie, again, have this like nasty weather problem. And you could say that these are starting to be like, well, shouldn't we prioritize the things that more customers have in common, because then we can reach more? Mistake number two, trying to figure out like how to just build your priority list based on commonality is not a good idea. And let's just take, for example, even if we talked about this nasty weather that Jane and Angie have, well, they live in completely different regions. The kind of weather that Jane's experiencing is very different to what Angie has in the Midwest. The casing, all the different features of the camera that Heather talked about, we would make different decisions. Trying to compromise across them is not the way to go. What we want to do is we want to make a choice. We want to pick a persona and we want to prioritize just the set of needs for that one particular persona. What that allows us to do is to align and show, and we talked about getting commitment several times already in this talk. It allows us to communicate why we've picked the set of features based on a set of needs, based on a single customer. And the reason we picked Peter was, if you take a look, he's going to buy multiple devices. This is someone who can afford multiple devices in his home, and he's got a burning need. He really is worried about leaving his house and his kids and his family. We know that we can probably spend less marketing dollars getting to Peter. So that prioritization of needs per persona is key. It's not to say that we forget about Jane and Angie. So when you have your conversation with your sales and accounting people, it may well be that Angie is V2 and the need across locking up is very similar in terms of a feature. And that's what our roadmap, and that's how we build our roadmap. This sort of nuanced step by step in terms of building persona, need, problem is what we really want to talk about. And I know this is a B2C product, so you're probably thinking, well, how does it work in B2B? Heather, you want to just like close individualized needs talking about that?
Yeah, for B2B, it is more complex. Don't get us wrong, but it is possible. And this is the process to do it, right? Understanding your buyer, your decision maker, your users, whether they're different roles in the SaaS application, right? You're getting to a very set of prioritized individualized needs per persona and making prioritization calls between your personas. You may end up solving for the user that is most frequently on the system first, because you have to nail that experience first. And that may mean that you're going to trade off some of the needs for another user if you've got constrained resources. It's a an exercise in criteria-based decision making once you have a very clear set of needs by persona. And once you have those prioritization discussions, it makes it a lot easier to make decisions and justify them to your leadership teams, right? So we need to choose a problem, right? We need to not boil the ocean, and nor do we want to be too confined, but we want a problem that converges the team around a direction. We want to choose personas, prioritize our personas, and make them actionable, and then get to a set of prioritized needs per persona and rinse and repeat. You're going to continually learn as you do more research. You're going to evolve the problem over time. You're going to evolve your personas over time, and you're going to evolve those needs over time as you launch the product and learn, do prototype testing. All of this fits into any methodology you can think about: agile, lean. These are sort of the foundations that start in all of these different methodologies. So let's bring this all together in practicing groundwork. And the next page, I'll just jump into that. This is the book. So we've sort of highlighted the first three pillars. Those are the main pillars of groundwork: convergent problem statement, actionable persona, and individualized needs. We didn't talk about today are the practices that Vidya just highlighted on earlier. There's three practices that are critical to establishing any one of these pillars. And that's leveraging hypotheses, right? Leveraging hypotheses to guide scrappy research. We are true believers in scrappiness. Getting research up and running and ongoing research with small numbers, but in a very disciplined way so that you learn and move quickly. And then getting commitment from the organization. Again, that is a critical piece of product management. And our whole goal with Groundwork is to help everyone. Like, our mission in life is to help everyone get better at making better products and leveraging just a simple framework that can be used in the largest organizations and the smallest organizations. That's why we're here.
If you want to know more, all the templates, we want to make it freely available. As Heather said, it's our mission to make it simpler. So you can go to productgroundwork.com and download and look at and see if it's applicable for your teams to use some of the templates. They're simple, they're scrappy. We don't want to spend days. We want to spend hours kind of getting teams to make progress on each of the pillars. So it's not complex at all. If you want to learn more, if you're interested in this at all, we're happy to send you our book so that you can see if it's something that might be useful for your team. It's our gift back. It's a season for CG, so it's near and dear to my heart. And then I just want to let you know that if you're interested in sending maybe one team member, there's a workshop. You can take a look there as well. A lot of the time we work in teams. For the first time, we're doing public workshops next year. So we'd love for you to trial it out. So send a trial balloon, send someone and see if they can work it. It's everything based on their product, your product. So with that, I'm going to get, while I have the feedback slide up, because you know how important feedback is for all of us. Please take a minute to do that, and hope, I know that we went a few minutes over, but hopefully we've got a time for a couple of questions.
I do have a couple of questions for you. So with regards to the problems and the personas, how do you know when you've identified a big enough problem, big enough persona, that if you were to solve for that persona and their needs, that it is going to be worth the investment and you haven't missed out on a bigger opportunity?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the way that we want to tee it up, as we've said, as you go broad, we're going to identify a number of different problems, and we're going to identify personas that are attached to them. You know, product market fit, which gets thrown out so much, right? It's simply, is it a big enough problem? Is there a big enough pain there? And is there a willingness to pay? So once we've got a problem and a persona identified, there's some design thinking techniques that we use. There's one that really lays it out in terms of importance to customer. So we're taking some educated guesses on how big the potential problem is, and a guess on how difficult it is to actually build this. We actually, I know I can't help myself, but we teach 10 design thinking techniques that all product managers should have. And it's ways to answer exactly that question. It's guiding you to say, how do I make educated guesses? With that, you turn it into that hypothesis, and then you've got to prototype and test it and size the market. We're not saying the work of actually figuring out TAMs, figuring out sizing, coming back and building business cases goes away. What we're doing is making it really simple to have clarity around which problems exist in a way they're all specified as problems so that you can then go ahead and prototype and test. I think a lot of time we jump from idea to prototype without focusing on, is this a big enough problem? And is the customer telling us it's a big enough problem? So that combination is why we've called it groundwork, because it allows us to do the work of, and much more efficiently, of creating the right prototypes, creating the right market tests, creating the right sizing exercises so that we're not wasting a bunch of time.
That's great. And it really tees up the next question, which is like, even if you've identified the personas and their needs, you certainly have to size them, and that is driven by hypotheses and evidence. But when you're actually not sure about, do I focus on buyer needs or user needs, especially if you're in a B2B product, or buyer versus decision maker, if you have these different persona types, how do you help people decide even amongst which personas to serve, even if it's within the same market?
Yeah, I mean, I would be interested in hearing Vidya's perspective on this, but my answer to that is, if I'm delighting the user personas and I'm solving the bigger problem, which in most cases for a buyer, if you're thinking B2B, it's going to be reducing cost, driving revenue, right? It's sort of the big three: profitability, and or better customer experience, right? If I am serving those metrics right through the delight of the users, I'm going to always focus on the user first, as long as I know what I'm building is solving the bigger problem for the company major client, right? So that's how I sort of approach that.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add is, and we've, in all the different companies that we've coached, the buyer persona is not that different. It's what Heather talked about. There's a consistency of what their need is. It's very little surprise. So the work then is around the buyer, because sometimes in complex B2B, there is another stage, there's another person involved, there might be an executive. Understanding the circle around the purchase decision is more critical in building out your personas than really focusing on that individual buyer, because it doesn't change that much.
Great. I think that is it. Do we have any other questions, Brittany, that I've missed?
I
don't think so.
Posted, but we do have someone with a hand raised.
I don't see that. You'll have to help me out.
Maybe not. Accidental.
Maybe not. Okay, accidental hand raise, no problem. You were obviously jam-packed with information here, and I know people took a lot away from it that's actionable, and I love how easy you made it. I love how generous you are with sharing your templates and making the book available and enabling people to learn more through the workshop. So thank you so much, Heather and Vidya, for not only creating this book, but sharing so much of the techniques and insights that you've gathered today with such great illustrative examples. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hope.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Hope, Vidya, and Heather. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. And yes, we're getting lots of great comments in the chat. So we'll follow up with you on books and templates and so on.